You're not coming." My son's voice cracked so loud I had to pull the phone from my ear. Behind him, I could hear all of it. 200 guests, a string quartet, the whole Christmas wedding I had sewn with my own two hands. "Mom, the dresses won't close," he said. "Camille is crying. The pharaohs keep asking where you are." Outside my window, snow was falling soft over the water, and I held a glass of wine I had not lifted one single finger to earn. For the first time in 40 years, I was calm. "I know exactly where I am. Weston," I told him. "Somewhere I finally have a seat." And I hung up. My name is Rosalind Hollis. Folks call me Roz. I am 68 years old. I buried my husband 11 years ago, and for 4 decades I sewed wedding gowns for the happiest day of other people's lives. That December, I finally learned what my own two hands were worth. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments. And please, stay with me until the end. Before I tell you how a 68-year-old woman ended up sipping wine by the ocean while her whole family came apart at the seams, you need to know a few things about me. And you need to know about the room. My workshop sits off the back of the house, and my late husband Grady built every last board of it with his own two hands. He was a cabinet maker by trade, the kind of man who could run his palm down a crooked door frame and feel it wrong in his teeth. When I told him I wanted to take my sewing out of the spare bedroom and make a real go of it, he did not say one word about money, or space, or whether a woman past 40 had any business starting something new. He just went quiet for about a week. And then one Saturday morning, he walked me out back, and there it was. A fitting platform with a step he had rounded off soft so no bride would ever catch a heel. A whole wall of pegboard for my shears and my chalk and my French curves. 2 big east-facing windows. Because he knew his wife liked to work in the morning light. He never once took the credit for it either. That was Grady all over. He built the room, and then he stepped back and let me be the reason people came to it. And Lord, did they come. For close to 40 years, if you were getting married anywhere in this county and you wanted a dress that looked like it cost a fortune, you saved up and you came to me. A Rosalind Hollis gown. That is what people called it, like it was a make and model off a lot. I did every bit of the beading by hand. I did all the fittings myself, every last one, because a dress is not a dress until it moves the way the woman moves. I hemmed for farm girls in from out past the county line, and I hemmed for the daughters of men who owned half of Main Street, and I treated every single one of them exactly the same. Because on that one morning, standing in front of that mirror, they were all the same, just scared and hopeful and holding their breath. I hung up my shears 4 years ago, or that is what I told everybody. The truth is, I never really stopped. The machine stayed threaded. The good scissors stayed sharp. And that, if I am being straight with you, is right where this whole mess got started. Because a woman who never truly puts her tools down is a woman everybody figures is always open for business. Let me give you a taste of what I mean. 2 winters back, my daughter-in-law Sloan had some big fancy work party, a black tie thing downtown. And at 9 o'clock at night, she came blowing onto my porch in a full panic with a $500 dress that would not close over the bust. She'd not so much knock as let herself in. I was already in my robe. I had the heating pad going on my back. And I got up, and I got out my pins, and I sat on that hard little stool and took in the side seams on a dress I would never wear, for a party I was sure I wasn't invited to. So my son's wife could walk into a room full of strangers and look like $1,000,000. I finished a little past midnight. She grabbed it off the form, said she'd catch me later, and she was out the door before I even got my pins back in the box. No thank you. Not a dime. Not so much as a text the next day to tell me how the thing went, or take the christening gown I made for my little granddaughter, Ivy. I put close to 60 hours into that tiny thing. Hand embroidered. Silk-covered buttons no bigger than a baby's fingernail. Sloan posted a picture of Ivy wearing it and wrote up this long, sweet caption about a treasured family heirloom, passed down through the generations. Passed down, like it dropped out of the sky. When one of her girlfriends asked in the comments where the gown came from, Sloane wrote back that, oh, it was one of a kind, and left it right there. My name was nowhere on it. It was like I had reached in, made something beautiful, and then wiped my own fingerprints off it on the way out the door. Now, here is the part where you might want to fuss at me a little, and I would not blame you one bit, because I let it happen. Every single time I let it happen, I taught them God's honest truth. I trained my own family to treat me like the hired help, one free favor at a time, because I thought that is what love was supposed to look like. I thought a good mother was one who never once made it about herself, who was always there, always saying yes, always sewing in the back while everybody else was out front dancing. You do that long enough, and folks stop seeing the sewing at all. They just see the dress. Done. Hanging there, like it grew on the hanger by itself. There is one thing that still sticks in my throat to this day. My youngest, my Delia, won some award at school years back, and I missed it. I missed it because I was up against a wedding deadline for a bride, whose mother slipped me an extra 100 to hurry it along. Delia never once threw it in my face. Not ever. But I saw her later, in a photo, scanning that little crowd for a face that was not there. I gave my very best hours to other women's daughters, and I have been carrying that around like a stone in my coat pocket ever since. I am not proud of the arithmetic on that one. Let me tell you one last thing before we get to how it all blew apart, because it matters later on. 12 years ago, I made Sloane's own wedding gown, my son's bride. I did it for free, of course, and I did it glad. But I remember standing at her very last fitting, and she kept running her fingers over the fabric, asking me, "Does this look expensive, Roz? Does it look like it costs something? Not does it look beautiful. Not does it feel like me. Does it look expensive?" I told her nobody alive would ever guess the price, and her whole body went loose with relief, like I had just pulled a thorn clean out of her. I did not understand it back then. I figured she was just a nervous bride. It would be years before I understood what that girl was so scared of, and by the time I did, it was way too late to be gentle about it. It was the first week of December when Sloane came by, and this time she did not come alone. She brought my son Weston, and she brought a folder. A real folder, glossy, the kind of thing you see slide across a desk in an office where people wear suits. She set it down on my kitchen table like she was closing on a house. "Roz," she said, "we need to talk about Camille's wedding." Camille is Sloane's baby sister, 30 years old, and she had gone and gotten herself engaged to Chase Farrow. Now, the Farrows are not our kind of people, and I mean that as a plain fact, not a complaint. Sterling Farrow has got his name stamped on half the commercial buildings between here and the interstate. Big money. Old money mixed in with the new. The type that summers somewhere with a name you have heard of and knows exactly which fork to reach for. To hear Sloane tell it, Camille marrying into that family was the single most important thing that had happened to any human being in the whole history of the world. And they were doing it at Christmas. A great big Christmas wedding, all candlelight and evergreen and 200 guests, out at some restored estate an hour outside of town. I opened the folder. It was a lookbook. That is the only word for it. 16 glossy pages, printed up and bound. There was a timeline broken down to the day. There were measurements, all 8 bridesmaids, the mother of the bride, Camille her own self, taken and typed up and laid out in a neat little grid. There were mood boards torn out of magazines. This neckline, that train, these exact shades of winter white and hunter green. There was a due date. There was even a little note about steaming and storage. And there was. And this is the part that got me right under the ribs. A page with the words design partner printed across the top. And underneath design partner, they had gone ahead and put my name. I sat there turning those pages. And I need you to understand something. Not one single line in that entire folder was a question. Nowhere did anybody write, "Roz, is this something you would even want to do?" Nowhere did it say, Do you have the time for this? Do you have the health for it? Do you want to spend your whole Christmas hunched over a machine until your hands seize up? They had already decided. They had built the entire thing around me, 16 pages of it, and then slid it across my own kitchen table, like I was a vendor they had already booked and just needed to bring up to speed. Roz, this is huge for us, Weston said. He would not quite look me in the eye. Sloan wants Camille to have a gown actually made, real couture, not something yanked off a rack at the mall. And the alterations, all the bridesmaids, my mother-in-law's dress, it all has to be perfect. These Pharaoh people are a serious deal, Mom. This could open doors for us you would not believe. Doors for them. My Christmas. My hands, my eyes that do not thread a needle near as quick as they used to. All of it, an open door for them. So I asked the plain question. I asked how many dresses we were talking about. Sloan flipped right to a page like she had been waiting on me to ask. Camille's gown, built from scratch. Then 8 bridesmaids to be taken in, and some of them had been ordered a size big on purpose, she explained, real proud of herself. So I would have plenty of room to work. Like making the job twice as hard was a gift she was handing me. Then her own dress, her mother Loretta's dress. And she would need me there the day of the wedding, too, on hand just in case anything. And here she gave this little wave of her hand, in case anything happened. I asked her on hand where. And that is when she told me the thing I keep circling back to. That is the thing that turned a key in a lock I did not even know was sitting inside me. She said the estate had a service room off the back, down near the kitchens, and they would set me up in there for the ceremony and the reception both. A table, a chair, my kit, good light. That way, she said, if a hem tore or a zipper stuck, I would be right there handy and would not have to come all the way over from the guest tables and make a fuss about it. I said, so I will not be sitting with the family. There was a little pause. Weston went and studied the wood grain of my own kitchen table like it held the answers to his whole life. Sloan just smiled at me, that smooth, easy smile of hers, and she said the seats were all spoken for, that Camille's list had gotten a little out of hand, that the Pharaohs had so many important people coming, and it just made more sense to do it this way. More practical, she called it. She said I was welcome to slip into the back of the ceremony and watch from the doorway if there happened to be a lull. If there happened to be a lull, I would make the gown that every last eye in that room would follow straight down the aisle. I would kneel on the floor in my good clothes and fix other women's zippers all night long. And when it came time to sit, to eat, to lift a glass and watch a girl I have known since she was in pigtails promise her whole life away to somebody, my name would not be on one single chair. I would be in a back room by the kitchen, on call. Like a plumber they were praying they would not have to bother. I closed the folder. My hands were dead steady, which surprised me some, because everything underneath them was not. I told them I would think about it. That is what I said, standing there in my own kitchen with that folder shut under my hand. I would think about it, and you already know how that went, because I would bet money you have done the very same thing. You say you will think about it, and then Tuesday rolls around, and the guilt shows up, and the habit comes walking in right behind the guilt. And before you know a thing, you are standing at your work table at 6 in the morning with a mouth full of pins. I caved. Course I caved. It is what I had always done. Inside of a week, I had Camille out back on Grady's platform, turning slow in the morning light while I chalked a muslin to her frame and pinned the darts. And I will tell you the truth, because there is no point in this whole story if I lie to you now. Some part of me lit right up doing it. My hands remembered. The good scissors felt right. Watching that shape come up out of flat cloth, watching a scared 30-year-old girl catch sight of herself in the mirror and go still. There is nothing else on this earth like it. That is the cruel little hook in the whole thing. I did love the work. I have always loved the work. What I was too worn down to see yet was that loving the work and being run into the ground were two completely different animals, and my family had gotten real good at dressing the second one up in the clothes of the first. So I worked. Camille came for her fittings, and I poured every good hour I had into her gown, because that was the piece that would take the longest and matter the most. I ordered the good thread, the silk, the beading I would need, and I fronted a chunk of my own money on the materials without even thinking, because that is how deep the pattern ran in me. Weston texted me updates I did not ask for. Sloan sent me pictures of hair and flowers and place settings, like I was on the planning committee for a party I still did not have a chair at. Then came the meet the femmes supper. Sloan threw it at her house. This whole to-do to introduce Camille's people to the Pharaohs before the wedding. And I got invited to that one, which I want you to sit with for a second, because it tells you everything. I was good enough for their living room. When they needed to show the Pharaohs, they came from folks with a little something. A mother-in-law who made real gowns with her own hands. Good enough to be a talking point, just not good enough for a seat at the actual wedding. I went. I wore my nice slacks. I brought a pie. And about an hour in, with the room full of that Pharaoh perfume and everybody laughing a beat too loud, I slipped off to the kitchen to get myself a glass of water and a minute of quiet, because that kind of noise just wears me out these days. The kitchen had one of those big islands, and around the far side of it, with her back to the doorway, stood Sloane, and beside her stood Vivian Farrow, the groom's mother, this tall, cool woman with silver hair set just so, and a strand of pearls that probably cost more than my car. They did not hear me come in, and I did not mean to stop, but I heard my own name, and a body will always stop for that. Vivian was saying something about the gown, about how she just could not get over that it was being made from scratch, how her own daughter had flown to another city for hers, and it had run them a small fortune. And Sloane laughed, this light, easy little laugh, and she said, "Oh, I know. That is the best part." She said, "Roz does it all. She does not charge us a thing. Obviously, she is family." And then she leaned in, the way you do when you are about to say the number. And she said, "Honestly, having her, it is saving us close to $40,000 on this wedding." $40,000. I stood there with my empty glass in my hand and I did not breathe. $40,000. She had a number. She had gone and priced me out, right down to the dollar, and the number was not zero to her. She knew exactly what my hands were worth. She had said it out loud to another woman like she was bragging on a good coupon she had clipped. She had it valued at $40,000, and then she had turned around and decided to pay me nothing. And she had the nerve, she had the actual nerve, to fold that nothing up and hand it to the Pharaohs as proof that our family was something special. I set my glass down real quiet, and I went back out and I smiled at people and I ate my pie. And I do not remember one single thing anybody said to me the rest of that night. Because a wall had come down inside me and I was standing in the rubble of it, seeing my whole life laid out plain in the dust. I got home and I could not sleep, so I did something I had never once done in 40 years. I sat down at the computer and I looked up what a gown like the one I was building actually costs. Full couture, hand beaded, custom pattern, built to the body. I found a house 2 states over, the kind of place with one name on the door and an appointment-only sign, and I found their pricing. Their bridal started at $35,000 and ran clean up past 60. For a piece like Camille's, all that handwork, I landed somewhere around $46,000. $46,000. And that was just the one dress. That did not touch the 8 bridesmaids, or the 2 mothers, or a full day of me on my knees at the venue keeping every stitch of it from coming apart. I printed the page. I do not even know why. I just needed to hold it in my hand. This piece of paper that said in black and white what 40 years of my life were worth on the open market, right next to the memory of my son's wife telling the Pharaohs I came free. Ramona came by the next morning. Ramona Bisek has lived 2 doors down from me for going on 25 years, and she is the kind of friend who will tell you your slip is showing, and your husband is wrong, and your coffee is weak, all in one breath, and love you the whole time she does it. She took one look at my face and set her purse down slow. I told her. All of it. The folder. The service room by the kitchen. $40,000. And I slid that printed page across the table at her. Ramona did not say anything for a good, long minute. She just looked at the number. Then she looked at me. And there was something in her face I did not expect. Something that went a lot deeper than mad. She said, Roz, you want to know what I have been carrying around for 30 years. And she told me about her own mother. How Ramona had spent the back half of that woman's life at her beck and call, dropping everything, every holiday, every sick day, every 2 a.m. phone call, and how her brothers had done not one thing but show up for the will. How she never once said a word about it, never said a single line down, because she thought that was what a good daughter was. And how her mother passed. And Ramona sat at that funeral and felt this thing come up in her that scared her to death, because it was not grief. It was relief. And under the relief was a rage she had swallowed. For so long it had near about eaten a hole through her. Do not do what I did, she said. Her voice had gone rough. Do not you dare wait until they are gone to find out you were angry the whole time. You march over there and you tell that girl no. And here is where I have to be honest with you again, because Ramona is my dearest friend on this earth, but she is not a saint and neither am I. She got going. She got wound up, the way people do when your problem cracks open their old wound. And somewhere in there she said something about how Weston was just as bad as her brothers. Worthless, the whole lot of them. Men just take and take. And I felt myself go stiff, because that is my son. However bad he was acting, that is still my boy that I raised, and I was not about to sit at my own table and let anybody, even Ramona, write him off like garbage. So I told her to ease up. I said, Ramona, you are grinding your own axe on my problem, and I need you to quit for a second. And to her credit, she did. She sat back. She said, you are right. And she reached over and put her hand on mine, and neither one of us said anything for a while. That is friendship, by the way, not somebody who agrees with you. Somebody who can hear when they have gone too far and pull it back. But her aim was true even when her mouth ran ahead of it. Something in me had already turned over. I just did not know yet how far it was going to carry me. It was 2 days later that I found the second thing, the thing that took what was left of my patience and lit it on fire. I was on the computer again, which for me is a whole event, hunting for a certain shade of ribbon, and I got it in my head to look up Camille's wedding, because Sloan had mentioned they had one of those wedding websites where guests go to RSVP and read the story and all that. I found it easy enough, real pretty. Photos of Camille and Chase up on some hillside, their whole history written out sweet. And there was a page about the details. The venue, the florist, credited by name, the band credited by name, the photographer credited by name, and down under the heading for the gown, it said custom couture by renowned local couturier Rosalind Hollis. Renowned. My name. Right there on the internet for 200 guests and the whole Pharaoh clan and God and everybody to read. Now you might think that would please me. My name out front for once. Getting its due. And for about half a second it did. And then the whole thing turned over in my stomach, because I understood what I was looking at. I was not a person on that page. I was a brand. I was a credential, sitting right there in the same column as the caterer and the string quartet, a name they were spending to make Camille's weddings sound like more than it was. Renowned local couturier Rosalind Hollis. They wanted the shine off my name. They wanted the pharaohs to read it and be impressed. They were more than happy to hang my name on the front door where it earned them something. They just could not find room for the actual woman anywhere inside the building. My name got a seat at that wedding. I did not. And that is when I dug a little further and found out this was not new. Sloan had been doing it for years. Little mentions here and there. My atelier this. My mother-in-law, the designer that. Dropping Rosalind Hollis into conversation, like a set of good pearls she got to wear whenever she wanted to look like she came from something. She had been spending my name my whole retirement and never once asked me for it. I called Weston. I was going to be reasonable. God help me. I was still trying to be reasonable at that point. I said, "Look, this is a lot of work. More than one woman my age can do right in the time we have. So let me bring in help. There is a younger woman I trained. She is good. She does alterations for two of the shops in town. Let me hire her to run the bridesmaids and the mothers so I can put my hours into Camille's gown and be at the wedding right. I will pay half of her rate. You all pay the other half. Fair and square." And Weston went quiet for a second. And then he said, Mom, we cannot really do that." I asked him why on earth not. They were renting a venue that cost more than my house. They had a $46,000 gown coming to them for free. They could not split the cost of one seamstress. And he said the thing. He said, "It is just. It will not be a Rosalind Hollis gown anymore. Will it if some other lady is doing half of it? Sloane says the whole point is that it is all you. That is what makes it special. That is what makes it real. If we bring somebody else in, it kind of, I do not know, it cheapens it." There it was, laid out so plain even he could not hear how ugly it was. The value was me. My name, my hands, all of it, all mine, that was the whole product. They needed every stitch to come off my own two hands so they could stand in front of the pharaohs and say it was real. And that exact same realness, the thing worth $46,000 to them, the thing they were selling to the whole world with my name on it, was worth so little to them as a person that they would not spend one dime to keep me from working myself to the bone. They would not hire it out because hiring it out would cost money and would strip the shine off. But they would sure spend my body for free and call it love. I told Weston I would call him back. And I sat there in Grady's workshop, in the room the best man I ever knew built for me with his own hands so his wife could work in the morning light. And I looked at that muslin on the form, and I finally saw the whole shape of the thing. They had priced me. They had branded me, and they had never once, in 40 years, seen me at all. I did not sleep that night either. I lay there in the dark next to the empty side of the bed, the side that had been empty 11 years. And I did something I had not let myself do in a long time. I let myself want something. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and went digging in the hall closet, in the box on the top shelf, where I keep the things I cannot throw away but cannot quite look at either. And down near the bottom, under the funeral cards and Grady's reading glasses, I found it. An old travel magazine, soft at the corners from being handled, from a spring maybe 15 years back. Grady and I used to do this thing on Sunday mornings where we would sit with our coffee and page through those magazines and dog-ear the places we were going to go. Someday, when the kids were grown, when there was a little money set by, when there was time, there was never time. That was the joke of our whole marriage, except neither one of us was laughing at the end of it. There was always a wedding to finish, always a bride whose mother was in a hurry, always somebody who needed my hands more than I needed a week off. And then Grady's heart quit on a Tuesday in the garden, with a trowel still in his fist, and all those dog-eared pages just turned into a box I could not open. But I opened it that night, and I flipped through until I found the one he had circled. Not dog-eared, circled twice in his heavy pencil, which meant it was the one he really meant. The Larkspur Inn, way up the coast of Maine, an old sea captain's place, all weathered shingle and window seats, with a big stone fireplace in the main room. And there was a little line under the photo that Grady had underlined, about how in the winter you could sit by that fire and watch the storms come in off the water. He used to say it to me, half teasing, "One of these days, Roz, I am going to take you somewhere they wait on you for a change. Somewhere you sit down and somebody else brings you the coffee. Watch the snow come down over the ocean and not lift one finger." One of these days. One of these days had come and gone, and I had spent every last one of them on my knees in front of other people's mirrors. I turned on the computer, and I looked it up, and it was still there, still taking guests. And in December, being the dead of the off-season, a week ran a little under $2,000, room and every meal included, a Christmas Eve dinner and all. Almost exactly what I had scraped into my little rainy day fund over the past several months. Money I was saving for the boiler if it went, for the property tax, for the kind of thing a woman my age is supposed to keep on hand for when the roof caves in. I sat there with the cursor blinking over that reserve button and I thought, Roz, you have lost your whole mind. $2,000. On yourself. At Christmas. Alone. It was selfish. It was reckless. It was every single thing a good mother is trained her whole life not to be. I did not book it that night. I want you to know that, because I know how these stories go, and I know you are expecting me to be brave. I was not brave. I closed the laptop and I went back to bed, and I lay there feeling like a fool for even looking. The next few days, I kept working on Camille's gown, because whatever I was going to do about the rest of it, I had made up my mind about one thing. That girl was innocent in all this. Camille never asked to be the centerpiece of her sister's climb up the ladder. She was just a 30-year-old kid in love, and she deserved a beautiful dress from somebody who cared, and I was not about to take my fight with Sloane out on her. So I finished it. I put my whole heart in it. I hand-set every bead. And when it was done, when it hung on the form in the morning light looking like something out of a dream, I will admit I stood there and cried a little. Because it might have been the best thing I ever made, and I made it for a family that would not save me a chair. I had Camille come by, and I did her final fitting, and I zipped her up, and she turned around and looked in that mirror and put her hand over her mouth. And she said, Roz, I do not deserve this. And Lord, if she only knew how right she was, but not the way she meant it. I told her she looked like the prettiest bride I ever dressed, and I meant that too. Then I steamed it and I bagged it and I drove it over to Sloane's myself and hung it in the closet. Done. Complete. So no matter what happened next, the child would walk down the aisle in the gown I promised her. That part was between me and Camille, and I kept my word. It was during those fittings, though, that something else started nagging at me, way in the back of my mind, and I could not put my finger on it. When you have spent 40 years standing 6 inches from people while they hold their breath and try to look like more than they are, you get to where you can read a room like a palm. And there was something off about the Pharaohs. Sterling came by once to drop Vivian, and he could not look you in the eye. This big, important man, all bluster and none of it landing. And the whole wedding, the scale of it, the 200 guests, the estate, the flowers I priced in my head at 10,000 easy. It was big even for money like theirs. It had that too much smell to it. The smell of a family spending like the wolf is at the door and they are trying to drown out the scratching. I did not know what it meant. I filed it away, the way I file everything away, and I did not think on it again for months. But my gut had already clocked it. My gut is usually about a year ahead of my head. Then two things happened close together that made up my mind for me. The first was Delia, my daughter, out in Colorado. I finally called her one night and told her the whole business, and she went quiet the way she does. And then she said, Mom, that is straight up insane. She said, they are charging admission to your name and sticking you in a back room by the kitchen. And I felt something in my chest just crack open at hearing another person say it out loud, at not being crazy. But then because she is honest, and because she loves me, she also said, you sure about this, though? She said, whatever you are thinking about doing, you sure you can take the fallout? Because Weston is going to lose it, Mom. Sloane is going to make your life hell. It is going to get real ugly before it gets any kind of better. And I told her I did not know if I was sure, because I did not. My own daughter, the one on my side, was asking me if I had thought it through, and I had to tell her the truth, which was that I was scared out of my skin. The second thing was Grady's sister, my sister-in-law, Corinne. Sloane must have gotten in her ear, because Corinne called me up out of nowhere, and she had that sugar in her voice that always means a knife is coming. She went on about how family sacrifices for family, How her own mother, God rest her, did for everybody and never complained one time. How she just hated to see me being, and she paused right here to find the softest way to stick it in. Being difficult, this close to Camille's big day. Being selfish. There is that word again. Selfish. The word they always reach for the second you stop letting them use you. They never once call it selfish when you are giving them your whole life for free. They only find that word the day you try to keep a little something back for yourself. And you want to know the awful part. For about a day, Corinne won. She got in my head. I picked up the phone to call Weston and tell him fine. Forget I said anything. I would do it, all of it. The service room, the whole thing. I had the phone in my hand. That is how strong the pull was. 40 years of being the yes woman does not let go of you just because you had one good cry and looked at a magazine. But then I thought about Grady's pencil, circled twice. One of these days, Roz. And I thought, how many of these days do I have left? I am 68. I have buried a husband. I do not know how many Christmases are still in front of me, but I know for a fact how many I have got left to spend serving people who will not save me a seat. And the answer I decided on, standing in my kitchen with that phone in my hand, was zero. Not one more. I was clean out. I put the phone down, and then I picked it back up, and I called Ramona, because I needed to hear a friendly voice before I did the thing I was about to do. And I said, Ramona, I am booking the inn. I heard her actually whoop on the other end. She said, oh, thank God. And then she said, do not you back out on me, Rosalind Hollis. And I said I would try not to, which was the most honest thing I could offer. I hung up and I opened the laptop, and my hands were shaking so bad I mistyped the card number twice. A week at the Larkspur Inn, the whole stretch of the wedding, room with a water view, every meal, the Christmas Eve dinner. My finger hung over that button for the longest time. This was it. This was the line. Once I pressed it, there was no unpressing it, no smoothing it over, no pretending I was just being dramatic. I thought about the service room by the kitchen. I thought about $40,000 said out loud like a coupon. I thought about my name on the front door and the woman nowhere in the house. I pressed it. Reservation confirmed. A charge that near about emptied my little fund. And something moved in my chest that I did not even have a word for at first, because it had been so long. It was not guilt. Guilt I knew. This was underneath the guilt. And it was real. And it was terrifying. And it was mine. It was freedom. Weston called the very next morning, all business, ready to lock in the plan for the day of the wedding, where I would set up in the service room, what time I should get there. And I stood in my kitchen with the light coming through the windows Grady put in, and I took a breath, and I told him, Weston, I am not doing the wedding. There was this dead silence on the line. I could feel the whole world go still. What? He said. What does that mean you are not doing it? I said. It means I am not going to be in a back room by the kitchen while you all have a wedding. Camille's gown is done. It is hanging in Sloane's closet. That is my gift to her, and it is finished. But the rest of it, the alterations, the day of, being on call like the help, I am not doing it. You did not ask me. You told me. And I am telling you now. No. His voice went up about 3 notches. Mom, you cannot be serious. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Sloane already told the Pharaohs. There are 8 bridesmaids with dresses that do not fit. What are we supposed to do? I do not know. I told him, and I was surprised how even it came out. You are a grown man with resources. You will figure it out. Hire somebody. There are seamstresses in this town who would take the job. But it will not be me, and it will not be free, and it will not be from a service room by the kitchen. I could hear Sloane in the background now, could hear her voice climbing, and Weston pulled the phone away, and there was some muffled back and forth. And then he came back on, and his voice had gone cold and mean in a way I had heard from his father exactly never. He said, if you do this, Mom, you are going to ruin Camille's wedding, and humiliate this whole family in front of the most important people we have ever met? Is that what you want? To blow it all up because your feelings got hurt, and a week before, that would have leveled me. That would have had me apologizing and grabbing my pins. But I just said, I hear you, Weston, and the answer is still no. I love you. Tell Camille her dress is beautiful. And then I said the last thing I had to say, which was, I am going away for Christmas. I will not be reachable. Please do not come by the house, because I will not be there. He started in again, loud, and I did not hear the end of it, because I said goodbye, and I meant it, and I hung up the phone. I stood there for a second. Then I turned it all the way off. That little screen going dark in my hand like a door swinging shut. I put it in a drawer, and I went and got my suitcase down from the closet, and I started to pack for the ocean. The drive up took the better part of a day, and I made every mile of it with my heart going two directions at once. For a stretch of highway I would feel so light I about laughed out loud. This old woman alone in her car with a packed bag and nobody's dinner to get home for. And then the next exit would come up and my hands would go tight on the wheel and I would think, what in God's name are you doing, Rosalind? Turn around. Go home. Fix the dresses. Apologize. Sit in the back room and keep the peace like you always do. Twice I got in the right lane to turn around. Twice. And both times, right when I was about to do it, I would hear Sloane's voice in my head, that smooth, easy little voice, telling me I could set up in the service room down by the kitchens and slip into the ceremony if there was a lull. If there was a lull, and my foot would ease back onto the gas, and I would keep on north. The Larkspur Inn was better in the flesh than it ever was on that soft old page. It sat up on a rise over the water, all silvered shingle and steep roofs, with smoke curling out the chimney and the whole gray Atlantic heaving away behind it. When I pushed open the door, there was that fireplace, the big stone one, going full, and the heat of it hit me in the chest along with the smell of wood smoke and something baking. And I swear to you, I felt my shoulders come down from around my ears for the first time in 3 weeks. A young woman at the desk looked up and gave me a smile with nothing behind it but plain kindness. Mrs. Hollis, she said, we have got you up on the 3rd floor. Water view. Welcome. You must be worn out from the road. Traveling on your own this trip. And I said yes. I braced for it to come out sad, the way that word always had. All those years. Alone was a thing that happened to me, a thing to be pitied for. But standing there in that firelight with the sea booming behind the walls, it did not come out sad at all. It came out like something I had earned. Yes, I said, on my own, and I near about grinned when I said it. My room had a window seat that looked straight out over the water, just like the pictures. And that first evening I sat right down in it with my coat still on and watched the light go out of the sky over the ocean. There was weather coming. You could feel it. The water had that iron color it gets, and the gulls had all gone to ground. Grady would have loved it. Grady would have sat right where I was sitting with his big hand around a coffee mug and said, now this, Roz, this is the good stuff, and I would have agreed with him, and we would have watched it come in together. I let myself cry about that for a minute. Then I washed my face and went down to supper. And here is the thing nobody prepares you for when you have spent your whole life doing for other people. Being done for feels almost wrong at first. It itches. They sat me at a little table by the window. And before I could even think to ask, a young man came by and filled my water glass. Just filled it. Nobody told him to. I did not have to catch anybody's eye or half rise out of my chair or say, excuse me. He just saw that it was empty, and he filled it, because that was his job, and taking care of me was the whole point of him being there. I sat and I read a menu and I picked exactly what I wanted off of it, the seared scallops, without one single thought about whether somebody else would eat them, or what they cost by the pound, or whether it was practical. I ordered a glass of white wine. And when it came, and the food came, I ate it hot. Do you understand what I am telling you? I ate a meal, sitting down. that was hot, that I did not cook, in a chair that was mine, at a table with my name on the reservation. I could not tell you the last time I had done that. 40 years of Christmases, and I had spent every one of them on my feet in a kitchen, eating cold turkey standing up at the counter after everybody else was through. I damn near wept into the scallops. But it was a good kind of weeping. The kind that means something inside you is finally getting set right. Now, I had not been at the inn a full day before I figured out they had a wedding fixing to happen there that very weekend. A small one, nothing like the circus back home, maybe 30 or 40 people. They were stringing greenery along the staircase and setting up chairs in the big room by the fire. And Lord, was that a thing to sit with, me having run all that way to get shut of a wedding, only to land in the middle of somebody else's. But this one had a different feeling to it. Nobody was hollering. Nobody had a 16-page folder. It just felt like people who loved a girl getting ready to watch her be happy. The bride was named Nell. I met her the second evening, though met is a soft word for how it went, because what actually happened was I came down the back stairs, looking for a cup of tea, and found a young woman sitting on the bottom step with a garment bag across her knees, crying like the world had ended. I have seen a lot of brides cry. I know the difference between the happy ones and the other kind, and this was the other kind. So I sat down on that step next to her, an old stranger in a cardigan, and I asked her what was wrong. Her dress was ruined. That is what she got out between the hiccups. She had ordered it online to save money, because money was tight, and it had shown up 2 sizes off, and the seam up the back had torn clean out in shipping. And the one alterations lady in the nearest town was booked solid through the holiday and could not touch it, and the wedding was in 2 days. And she had spent everything she had, and there was no fixing it and no money to fix it with. And she was going to get married in a dress that gaped open down her whole back like a hospital gown. And I want to tell you what happened in me right then, because it is the whole heart of this. Something lit up, same as it always had. My hands actually itched for the work. I said, "Honey, let me see it." She unzipped that bag, and I looked at the dress, and I ran the torn seam through my fingers, and I saw the whole thing at once the way I always do. The seam was nothing, an hour, hour and a half. The fit I could bring in at the sides, and nobody would ever know it came big. I had my kit up in my room because I never travel without it. Some fool part of me apparently unable to leave home without a needle, even when I was running away from a needle. And I told her, "Nell, you are going to get married in a dress that fits you like it was made for you, and it is not going to cost you 1 red cent, and I do not want to hear another word about it." She looked at me like I had grown wings. I fixed that dress up in my room that night, with the storm finally breaking over the water outside, the wind just screaming, the snow coming down sideways over the black ocean, exactly like Grady always said it would. And I was happier than I had been in years. That is the part I need you to catch. Nobody made me do it. Nobody sent a folder. Nobody priced me out to another woman like a coupon, or hung my name on a website and left me by the kitchen. A girl needed help, and I wanted to give it. And I gave it freely and gladly with my whole heart, and it filled me right up. And that, sitting there with a mouthful of pins at midnight, is when I understood the thing that had been eating at me my whole life. The sewing was never the problem. It was never the work. I loved the work. I would love it till the day I died. The problem was never being asked. The problem was being used. The problem was a family that wanted the dress and could not be bothered to see the woman. Take that one thing away, the being taken for granted, and the exact same needle that had run me into the ground became the best medicine on this earth. But it was something Nell said that cracked the whole rest of it open. We got to talking while I worked. She told me she waited tables and worked catering gigs, banquets and weddings and such, to make ends meet, and that she was marrying a fella whose family had a good deal more than hers did, and how scared she was of meeting them all, of walking in and having them see she came from nothing. She laughed a little and she said, "You know the funny part. I have worked 100 weddings like the one I am about to have. I have carried the trays. I have stood in the coat room taking everybody's furs, and now I am the one in the white dress. And I keep waiting for somebody to point at me and say, "Hey, that is just the help. What is she doing here?" And I went still with my needle in the air, because I had heard those exact bones before, 12 years ago, on Grady's fitting platform, a different scared girl running her fingers over the fabric, over and over, asking me not is it beautiful, not does it feel like me, but does it look expensive? Does it look like it cost something? Make sure nobody can tell. My son's bride, Sloane, and it all came together in a rush. All these little things I had filed away over the years, and never once looked at straight. How Sloane could never leave a price tag on anything. How she spent money she plainly did not have to make sure everything shined. How she went stiff and strange around the Pharaohs, too loud, trying too hard. And then a real memory, sharp as a pin, from years back, at some event, Sloane a little into her wine, telling me low and almost mad about how she had put herself through everything by working banquets at the country club, coat check, carrying trays, and how those rich women would hand her their coats without ever once looking at her face. Like she was a rack, like she was nothing. Sloane grew up with nothing, and she spent her young years standing in the back room by the kitchen while other people had the party. And she made herself a promise. I would bet my life on it, standing in one of those coat rooms with her arms full of other women's furs. Never again. Never me again. And here she finally was, married up, one foot in the door of the Pharaoh world, throwing her sister the grandest wedding money could fake. And she needed somebody in the back room by the kitchen, because that was just how the world was built. Somebody always had to be the help. And by God, it was never, ever going to be her again. So she picked me. Now hear me good, because I am about to say two things that do not fit together nice, and you are just going to have to hold them both, same as I did, knowing all that did not make it right. Not one bit. What was done to Sloane did not give her any right to turn around and do it to me. A wound is not a permission slip. She was a grown woman, and she made a choice. And the choice was cruel. And I was not about to sit in that pretty inn and decide it was all fine because she had a hard start. It was not fine. But Lord help me, I understood her. For the first time in 12 years, I understood my son's wife all the way down. And I thought about Nell, who came from the exact same nothing, who had carried the exact same trays and stood in the exact same coat room, sitting downstairs in a torn dress and worried sick, and who had reached the same fork in the road Sloane once reached. And Nell went the other way with it. Nell stayed soft. Nell was grateful. Nell was going to spend her whole life being kind to the help because she remembered being the help. Same wound. Two women. One of them let it make her tender, and one of them let it make her hard. I sat there a long while after that, the storm going wild against the glass, Nell's mended dress hanging finished and lovely on the back of the door. And I thought about that girl on my platform 12 years ago, so scared of being seen as cheap, and I felt something for Sloane I had not felt in a long time. It was not forgiveness. It was too soon and too raw for that, but it was close kin to it. It was the beginning of the thing forgiveness grows out of. What I did not know, sitting up there warm and safe with the snow coming down over the sea, was what all that understanding was going to cost me back home. Because my phone was still off, dark in the drawer beside the bed, and a whole world was blowing up on the other side of it, and I had not heard a word of it yet. I kept that phone off for days. I want to be straight with you about how good that was, because we put a special kind of shame on a woman who goes quiet on her family, like it makes her heartless. It did not make me heartless. It made me a person again. Those first days at the Larkspur, I woke up to the sound of the sea instead of a to-do list. I ate 3 hot meals a day I did not cook. I walked the cold beach in the mornings with my collar up and picked up stones. I read a whole book, an actual book, cover to cover, something I had not done since Grady passed. The phone sat dark in the drawer by the bed like a sleeping animal, and I did not poke it. I knew a storm was building on the other side of that little screen. I just was not ready to walk out into it yet. Christmas Eve, the input on a proper dinner, white tablecloths, candles down the middle of every table, a little jazz trio playing carols by the fire. They sat me by the window again, and I splurged. I ordered the lobster, which I had never once in my life let myself order because it always felt too dear, too much for just me. The young man brought me a glass of champagne with the compliments of the house and wished me a Merry Christmas. And I sat there in that warm room full of firelight, and I felt, for a stretch, like the luckiest woman alive. And then, right in the middle of all that beauty, it came for me anyway. I looked around at all those tables, the couples leaning in, the families with kids kicking their feet under the chairs, everybody with their people, and it hit me like cold water down the back of my neck that I did not have mine. That 200 miles south, my whole family was together and they hated me. That my son had told me I was going to ruin everything and blow it all up, and maybe he was right. Maybe Corinne was right. Maybe I was exactly what they said I was. A selfish old woman who broke her family clean in half over a chair and a window seat. I set my fork down and I could not pick it back up. The lobster went cold in front of me, which, if that is not the meanest little joke the Lord ever played. 40 years of cold food, and here I finally ordered something worth eating hot and could not touch it. I went up to my room shaking, and I did the thing I had been putting off. I got that phone out of the drawer and I turned it on. It just about buzzed itself off the nightstand. It went and went. When it finally settled, there were more than 50 missed calls sitting there, spread across 3 days, from Weston, from Sloan, from numbers I did not even know, and a couple hundred texts, and a family group chat lit up like a slot machine. My heart was slamming. Part of me wanted to shut it right back off, but I made myself look. I read them in order, and I watched the whole thing happen through them, like watching a house burn from across the street. The early ones were panic. Mom, where are you? Mom, this isn't funny. Mom, please call. The dresses don't fit. Call me back. Then they turned. How could you do this to your own family? You are unbelievable. You are so selfish after everything we do for you. Sloan sent me a wall of text about responsibility and about how I had humiliated Camille on the most important day of her life, and that she hoped I was proud of myself. And from what I could piece together, it went about how I feared it would. Camille had her gown, the one I finished and hung in that closet with my own 2 hands, so the bride herself was beautiful. But you cannot get a good seamstress in this county 2 weeks before Christmas. I knew that better than anybody, because I am the one they all used to call. They scrambled and found some rushed girl who got 2 of the bridesmaids done halfway decent and ran out of time on the rest. So Camille walked down that aisle glowing, and lined up behind her stood her bridesmaids in dresses hanging off them wrong, hem stapled and pinned, one of them safety pinned right up the side where it would not close. And of course, the contrast made it worse. The one perfect dress making all the broken ones look even more broken. In front of 200 guests and the whole Farrow family, that Sloan had promised a wedding dressed head to toe in real couture. And then partway through the reception, the mother of the bride, Loretta, split a seam clean out under the arm, reaching up to hug somebody, and there was not one soul there who could fix it. So she spent her own daughter's wedding with her arm clamped down against her side, hiding a tear, near about in tears herself. I read all that, and God forgive me, for about 10 seconds. Something ugly rose up in me and it felt good. Good, I thought. Now you know. Now you all know what my 2 hands were actually worth, since you would not hear it when I said it. Let them stand there pinned and torn in front of your precious pharaohs. Serves you right. And then I caught sight of my own face in the dark window over the water, and I did not much like the woman looking back, because there was Camille in the middle of it. Camille, who never did one thing to me, who was just a girl in love who wanted a nice wedding, standing there on her big day, surrounded by a mess that was not her doing, catching the whispers, seeing the Pharaoh's trade looks. She got hurt in this too. And that mean little flash of satisfaction, that was not me. That was not the woman Grady married. I did not do what I did to punish a bride or to watch people suffer. I did it to save my own life. And the second it curdled into wanting somebody else to hurt, it stopped being about saving anything. I sat on the edge of that bed a long while with the phone in my lap, and I felt about as low as I have ever felt. The high of the champagne was gone. The room felt too big. And that pull came on strong, the oldest pull I know, the fix-it pull. I could be in the car in 10 minutes. I could drive through the night and be home by morning and let them yell at me and grab my pins and set every one of it right and be forgiven and go back to being the woman in the back room who at least got to belong. My hand was already reaching for my shoes. I am telling you the truth. I very near got in that car. What stopped me was the next morning, and it was Nell. Nell got married at the inn on Christmas Day. Small, like I said, 30 odd people, in the big room with the fire going and greenery down the stair rail. And I got invited, because that is the kind of girl Nell is. She takes an old stranger who mended her dress on a back stair and she says, "Please, you have to be there. You are the reason I am not walking down this aisle in a hospital gown." So I sat in one of those chairs, a guest with a real seat, and I watched Nell come down the stairs in the dress I fixed with my own hands in the middle of a storm, and it fit her like it was poured on. And she was so beautiful the whole room drew a breath. And here is what got me. Her husband's family, the ones with the money, the ones she had been so scared of. They were not cold at all. They wrapped that girl up. His mother was crying. They folded Nell right into them like she had always been theirs. Nobody stuck her in a back room. Nobody priced her out. Nobody made her the help at her own wedding. And I sat there in that chair and I understood, all the way down to the floor of me, that I had done the right thing. Because look what my hands were when they were wanted. Look what this work was when it was received instead of extracted. A gift, a joy, the best of me. There was nothing wrong with the sewing, and there never had been. The only thing wrong was a family that took it and could not be bothered to see the woman it came out of. I did not run away from my family. I ran toward the last thing I had left to protect, which was the part of me that still knew her own worth. And watching Nell get folded into all that love, I made up my mind. I was not driving home in the night to grab my pins. I was staying. I was going to see this through. That afternoon, warmer than I had been, steadier, I finally sat down and listened to the voicemails I had been too scared to play. Most were what you would guess. But the last one, sent late the night of the wedding, was different. It was Weston, and my boy was not yelling. His voice was wrecked, low and cracked and slow, like a man talking through a busted lip. "Mom," he said. "It was a disaster. It was bad, Mom. Everybody could see. And I kept looking around for you, and you weren't there. And it finally hit me, standing there watching it fall apart, that I never once, in my whole life, understood what you actually do, what it takes. I just thought dresses showed up. I thought you liked it. I took every bit of it for granted, all of it, all these years. And I let Sloan put you in a back room, and I said nothing. And I am so ashamed of myself I can hardly breathe." He stopped. I could hear him crying, my grown son, 41 years old. "I'm sorry, Mama," he said. "I am so sorry." And that was the end of it. I played it 3 times. And on the third time, I let myself cry too. Not the ugly kind from the night before, but the other kind. The kind that means something frozen is finally thawing out. Because that was real. That was not a man trying to get his seamstress back. That was a son who had seen his mother for the first time in 40 years. It did not fix a thing, but it was a door coming open a crack, and I had spent long enough on the wrong side of doors. I called Delia. I needed to hear a voice that loved me, and I could not quite call Weston yet. And that is when my daughter told me the thing that turned my son from a coward into something a whole lot sadder and more human. "Mom," she said, real quiet, "there's stuff you don't know." And she told me Weston and Sloan were drowning, buried in debt, the kind that keeps a man up at 3 in the morning, doing math that never works out. He had made some bad bets, borrowed against things he should not have, and had been papering over it for a couple years, with a nice house and a big smile so nobody would know. And this wedding, Camille marrying into the Pharaoh world, that was not just about Sloane climbing. For Weston, it was a lifeline. Sterling Pharaoh moved in circles where deals got done over dinner, where a handshake was worth more than any bank, and Weston had it in his head that if he could just get close to that, get invited in, get Sterling to like him, it might be the thing that pulled him out of the hole before it swallowed him whole. That is why he could not cross Sloane. That is why he would not spend a dime to hire me help and would not risk one thing embarrassing the Pharaohs, and put his own mother in a back room and said nothing. It was not that he did not love me. It was that he was going under, and he had bet everything on those people, and he was too proud and too scared to tell a living soul. I sat with that for a long time after Delia and I hung up, and it did not make what he did okay, no more than Sloane's story made hers okay. A drowning man does not get to hold your head under to keep himself up. But Lord, I understood it. My son had been terrified in the exact same way I had been terrified my whole life. Both of us too scared to say out loud that we were not okay. Both of us performing for people who did not deserve the show. What I did not know yet, sitting there on Christmas Day with the ocean going gray outside my window, was that my son's lifeline was already rotting through. That the very people he had bet his whole future on were not what they looked like at all. And that the reckless, selfish family wrecking thing I had done, running off to the sea instead of kneeling in a back room, was about to turn out to be the only thing that saved him. I stayed the rest of my week. I was not going to let the ending get taken from me too, so I finished it out. I walked the beach. I sat by the fire. On my last night, I ate a quiet supper and watched the snow come down over the black water one more time. And I said goodnight to Grady in my head, and I told him I finally did it. Honey, I finally let somebody bring me the coffee, and I could just about feel him laughing. Then I drove home, and I left my phone on for good, and I let the world back in. The drive south, I was calmer than I had any right to be. I had made my peace with the fact that things might be broken for a long while, maybe for good. I had decided I could live with that, which is a strange and heavy freedom, deciding you can survive your own family being angry at you. When you stop needing everybody to be happy with you, a whole lot of chains just fall off in the road behind you. Ramona was waiting on my porch when I pulled in, and she near about knocked me over hugging me. And she stood back and looked at me and said, "Well, would you look at that? You look 10 years younger and about a foot taller." And I did feel taller. I felt like a woman who had gotten her spine back from wherever she left it 40 years ago. Weston came by 2 days later, alone. No Sloan, no kids, no folder. He knocked, which he had not done in years. And when I opened the door, he was standing there looking like 10 miles of bad road, unshaven, dark under the eyes, holding nothing in his hands, which somehow got me more than flowers would have, because it meant he had not come to smooth me over with a gift. He had just come. "Can I come in, Mom?" he said. I stepped back and let him. And I want you to notice what I did not do, because this is the part that took me 68 years to learn. I did not rush to him. I did not put the kettle on and start fussing and telling him it was all fine. "Do not you worry, sit down, let me feed you." That is what the old Roz would have done, would have been mothering the hurt right off of him inside of a minute, so I would not have to sit in the discomfort of my own son's face. I did not do that. I sat down across from him at the same table where he had slid me that glossy folder a month before, and I folded my hands, and I let it be quiet, and I let him be the one to fill it. It took him a bit. Then he started talking, and for the first time in his whole grown life, my son told me a story where he was the one in the wrong, and he did not once try to wriggle out of it. He told me about the wedding, the whole miserable day of it, the pinned hems and Loretta hiding her torn dress, and Camille trying to smile through it while the Pharaohs looked on. He told me how he stood there in the middle of it, feeling the floor go out from under him. And then he said the thing I did not expect. He said, the worst part wasn't even how it looked, Mom. The worst part was that somewhere in there I realized I was more upset about the pharaohs seeing it than I was about what I did to you. And that made me sick. That's who I'd turned into. I did not jump in to make that easier for him. I just nodded, and I let him keep going. He told me about the money. All of it. Everything Delia had already told me, but from his own mouth this time, which is a different thing. How deep the hole was. How long he had been hiding it. How he had bet the farm on getting close to Sterling Faro. And how he had looked at his own mother, the one person who had never once in his life let him down, and decided her dignity was a fair price to pay to keep those people happy. He said, I put you in a back room by the kitchen so I could impress a man I owed my future to. He said it flat, no excuses on it. And then he put his face in his hands and his shoulders went. And I sat there and watched my 41-year-old boy cry like he was 6. And Lord, every cell in my body wanted to get up and go to him. That is the pull. It never fully leaves you. But I held on because he needed to feel the whole weight of it. And me swooping in to lift it off him would have robbed him of the one thing that might actually change him. So I let him sit in it. And when he had cried himself out, I said, quiet, I hear you, Weston, and I believe you mean it. But I need you to understand something, and I need you to hear it all the way down. And then I told him, not off a printed list. I did not hand my son a contract like his wife handed me a folder, because I was not going to fight her ugliness with more ugliness. I just looked at him and I said it plain. I said, I am not the family sewing machine anymore. I am not on call. My hands are not a thing you get for free because I love you, and love is not a coupon you clip when you are short on cash. If you ever want something from me again, you ask like I am a person, and you wait for the answer, and the answer might be no, and no is a whole sentence. And if I ever set foot at a family gathering again, I sit at the table, not near the kitchen, at the table with everybody, like the mother of this family, which is what I am. Those are not requests. That is just how it is going to be from here on. He nodded the whole time, wiping his face. And he said, okay, Mom, okay. And then he said something that showed me he had actually learned the shape of it, not just the words. He said, and I'm not going to just say all this today and go back to normal in 3 months, am I? I'm going to have to actually show you. Over a long time. Yes, I said. That is exactly right. You are going to have to show me. For a long time. And that is when the last shoe dropped. The one I never saw coming, even with my gut a year ahead of my head. About 6 weeks after the wedding, it all came out about the pharaohs. Turned out Sterling had been running his whole operation on smoke and other people's money for years, robbing one pocket to fill another. The whole shining empire held together with tape and nerve. It went bust, loud and public, the kind of thing that puts a man's name in the paper for all the wrong reasons. And a lot of folks who had gotten close to him, who had shaken his hand and trusted his word and put their money where he pointed, got taken down right along with him. And here is the part that stops my heart every time I think on it. Weston had a deal all but signed. A big one. The one he thought was going to pull him out of the hole. Tangled up with Sterling and set to close right after the new year. He was going to mortgage the house on it. He was going to put in everything he had left and everything he did not. It was going to be his salvation. And it would have been the thing that finished him for good, would have taken the house, the kids' futures, all of it, right down the drain with Sterling's ship. But the wedding fell apart. And it fell apart because I was not there to hold it together. And when the pharaohs watched Camille's whole couture wedding turn into a rack of pinned and torn dresses, when the shine came off Sloane's grand production, that budding closeness between Weston and Sterling just cooled. The dinners stopped getting scheduled. The warmth Weston had been banking on went cold. He never got pulled all the way into the inner circle, and so he was not standing close enough to Sterling to get burned when the whole thing went up in flames. My leaving saved him. The single most selfish thing I ever did in my life. The thing they all screamed at me for. The thing that made my son call me a family wrecker. That is the thing that kept him from mortgaging his house onto a sinking ship. If I had done what I always did, if I had knelt in that back room and kept the peace and made everybody look good in front of the pharaohs, Weston would have closed that deal, and I would be telling you a very different story right now, one with no happy anything in it. Weston figured it out too when the news broke. He called me, and he was quiet a long time. And then he said, "Mom, if you'd done the wedding, if you'd just gone along with it like always." And he could not even finish it. And I said, "I know, son. I know." Neither one of us said anything for a while after that. Some things are too big to put a bow on. Sloan and I, that is a longer road, and I will not lie to you and tell you it got tied up sweet. She came to see me eventually, and her apology was not a clean one. There were still some justifications tucked in it, still a butt or two, still a little of her needing me to understand how stressed she had been. She never did come right out and say she knew what it was like to be the help, though I know she does, and I did not make her say it. I decided that was hers to carry. But the hard, cold thing she used to aim at me, that went away. She started calling me Roz, like it meant something, instead of like it meant nothing. It was not everything. It was not a daughter and a mother falling into each other's arms. But it was real, and it was more than we had. And I have lived long enough to know you take the true small thing over the pretty fake one every time. The months went on, and the repair came slow and imperfect, the way real things do. Weston kept showing me, like he said he would. He dug himself out of the money hole the honest way, which took a long time and a lot of humbling, and he never once asked me for a dime or a free stitch to do it. He started calling just to talk. He brought the kids by for no reason at all, and Micah and Ivy got to know me as a whole person and not just the grandma who makes stuff. And that is its own kind of gift I did not know I was missing. Delia and I got closer than we had been since she was small, and I told her, finally, about the award I missed all those years ago and the stone I had been carrying. And she cried and told me she forgave me a long time ago, and I got to set that stone down at last. And the work, that is the sweetest part, and I will keep it short. Word had gotten around some, the way it does. And one afternoon, I got a call from a woman who runs a real bridal house up in the city, who had heard about a certain retired couturier and wondered if I might ever want to take on a piece here and there, on my own terms, my hours, my price, my name on it out loud and proud. And I said yes, not to being used again, to being wanted. There is all the difference in the world between those two. And it only took me 68 years and one runaway Christmas to learn it. I sew now when I choose to, for people who see the woman and not just the dress, and it is the purest joy left in my life. I put a photograph on the wall in the front room, right where I see it every morning. It is one I had a stranger take of me on the beach up at the Larkspur that week. An old woman in a good coat with the gray sea behind her, not serving one single soul, just standing there in the wind, being worth something all on her own. I look at it every day. It reminds me. So that is my story. I ran off to the ocean at 68 years old and let my family fall apart in the snow behind me. And it turned out to be the bravest, most loving thing I ever did. Now let me leave you with the one thing I know for sure. People think the seam is the strongest part of a dress. It is not. A seam only holds because both sides give a little, evenly all the way down the length of it. Pull hard from one side alone and it puckers, and then it tears. For 40 years I sewed seams for the happiest day of other people's lives, and I let my own thread run all the way down to nothing. What I did that December was not walking out on my family. It was finally asking them to hold their side of the cloth. So if you are the one everybody leans on, hear me. Your love is not an endless bolt of fabric. Let them see what your hands are worth while there is still something left to measure. I learned that at 68. It was not too late, and it is not too late for you.